Imagine your home, the land your ancestors are buried in, the place where your children play, slowly dissolving into the sea. This isn't a scene from a dystopian movie. It is the lived reality for the people of Tuvalu. A nation is preparing its own obituary, drafting a digital will before it vanishes from the physical world forever. The ocean, once a source of life and sustenance, has become an existential threat, creeping closer with every high tide. Each wave that crashes on its shores feels less like a gentle caress and more like a relentless countdown. What does it feel like to watch your country disappear, inch by agonizing inch? This is a story about more than just land. It's about the soul of a people. I remember speaking with a grandmother named Mele, her face etched with the lines of a life lived by the sea. She pointed to a spot far out in the lagoon, her voice trembling slightly. "That is where my father's house stood," she told me. "The coconuts we picked as children grew on trees now swallowed by the water." Her story is not unique. It is the collective memory of a nation witnessing its history being erased by the rising tides. These are not just statistics on a climate report. They are deeply personal losses, repeated across every family on these 9 tiny islands. So where on earth is this place fighting for its very existence? If you were to spin a globe and let your finger land randomly on the Pacific Ocean, you would likely miss it entirely. Tuvalu is a tiny constellation of 9 low-lying coral atolls and reef islands, scattered like jewels on a vast blue canvas. It lies halfway between Hawaii and Australia, a remote outpost of humanity in the world's largest ocean. The total land area of all 9 islands combined is a mere 26 square kilometers, making it the 4th smallest nation on the planet. To put that into perspective, you could fit the entire country into a small corner of a major city. This geographical isolation has preserved a unique and deeply communal way of life. For centuries, Tuvaluans have lived in harmony with the ocean, their culture, traditions, and livelihoods intricately woven with its rhythms. The highest point in the entire country is a dizzying 5 meters above sea level. This is not a land of mountains and valleys, but a fragile collection of sand and coral, barely hovering above the waves. There is no high ground to retreat to, no hills to climb when the water comes. The very foundation of Tuvalu is porous coral, meaning that the sea doesn't just rise around it, it rises through it. The science behind Tuvalu's predicament is both simple and terrifying. For decades, our planet has been warming at an unprecedented rate due to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This warming has 2 major effects on our oceans. First, just like any liquid, water expands when it gets warmer. Given the sheer volume of the world's oceans, this thermal expansion causes sea levels to rise significantly. Second, the rising global temperatures are melting glaciers and ice sheets. Greenland, Antarctica pouring trillions of tons of fresh water into the sea. It's like leaving a tap running in a global bathtub with no drain. For a place like Tuvalu, the consequences are not abstract or distant. They are immediate and catastrophic. The global average sea level rise is about 3 to 4 millimeters per year. That might not sound like much, does it? It's about the thickness of 2 coins stacked together. But in this region of the Western Pacific, due to a combination of ocean currents and trade winds, the rate of rise is nearly 3 times higher. Imagine your front yard shrinking by a few centimeters every single year. It might be unnoticeable at first, but over a decade you would lose a significant portion of your land. For Tuvalu, this isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable reality. This gradual rise is amplified by natural events, turning a chronic problem into an acute crisis. During seasonal king tides, when the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon, take the story of a young fisherman named Pula. He learned to read the ocean from his grandfather, to understand the currents and the habits of the fish. But the ocean he knows today is not the same one his grandfather taught him about. The coral reefs, once vibrant gardens of color teeming with life, are bleaching and dying due to rising water temperatures. Then there is the quiet anxiety of mothers like Elia. She worries about her children's future on an island that may not exist when they grow up. During king tides, she watches with a heavy heart as her children splash and play in the floodwaters that creep into their village. She knows this water is contaminated with sewage and waste, a breeding ground for disease. She worries about the salt water seeping into their freshwater lens, the underground pocket of drinkable water that the island depends on. Water, the most fundamental element of life, has become a source of constant anxiety. Even the dead are not safe from the rising sea. In many coastal communities, cemeteries are being eroded by the waves. During storm surges, the ocean has exhumed graves, washing away the remains of loved ones and scattering them into the sea. This is a profound cultural and spiritual violation for a people who hold their ancestors in deep reverence. It is a gruesome and heartbreaking manifestation of the crisis, a sign that the ocean is not just claiming their future, but also their past. While the dramatic images of coastal flooding capture the world's attention, a more insidious crisis is unfolding beneath the surface. The very foundation of life on an atoll, fresh water and fertile soil, is being systematically poisoned by salt. Tuvalu, like most coral atolls, has no rivers or lakes. Its only natural source of fresh water is a thin lens of fresh rainwater that floats on top of the denser saltwater that saturates the porous coral rock below. This delicate balance, sustained for millennia, is now being catastrophically disrupted. As the sea level rises, it pushes the saltwater lens upwards, shrinking the layer of fresh water from below. This salinization of the freshwater lens is, honestly, an invisible emergency. Wells that once provided clean drinking water are becoming brackish and undrinkable. Families are becoming increasingly dependent on rainwater harvesting systems, large tanks that collect water from their rooftops. But, these systems are vulnerable. During periods of drought, which are becoming more frequent and severe due to changing weather patterns, these tanks can run dry. For generations, Tuvaluans have cultivated pulaka, a type of swamp taro, in specially excavated pits that reach down to the freshwater lens. These pits are the heart of their traditional food system, a resilient crop that can withstand cyclones. But as saltwater intrudes into the ground, it poisons the soil in these pits, stunting the growth of the plants or killing them outright. The sight of withered, yellowing pulaka leaves in a flooded pit is a powerful symbol of the nation's plight. Traditional agriculture is becoming impossible, forcing a greater reliance on expensive, imported, and often less nutritious processed foods. So, what do you do when your nation is sinking? If you are Tuvalu, you begin the audacious, honestly heartbreaking process of creating a digital twin. In a powerful address to the world, Tuvalu's foreign minister, Simon Kofe, announced a plan to become the world's very first digital nation. And, this is not a metaphor. The government is actively exploring ways to recreate the islands in the metaverse. They aim to preserve culture. They aim to preserve language. They aim to preserve history. It's kind of like a desperate message in a bottle, a last-ditch effort to ensure Tuvalu's identity does not vanish along with its territory. The vision is both futuristic and, deeply sorrowful. The project aims to digitally map every island, every building, every landmark. It seeks to create a virtual space where future generations of Tuvaluans can connect with their heritage, potentially scattered across the globe as climate refugees. This radical plan is also a clever and desperate political statement. By declaring its intention to become a digital state, Tuvalu is challenging the very definition of statehood in international law. A nation is traditionally defined by territory. A nation is defined by a population, and by having a government. But what happens when the territory disappears? Can a nation exist without land? But let's be clear, this is not the solution they want. No one wants to trade their physical home for a virtual one, or the sound of your children laughing on a real beach. It's easy, maybe even natural, for someone living in a large, high-elevation country to look at Tuvalu's crisis as a distant, isolated tragedy. After all, it's a tiny nation, far away, with a small population. Its disappearance, while sad, might not seem to have a direct impact on the daily lives of people in London, Tokyo, New York. So, why should the fate of 11,000 people on a remote Pacific atoll matter to the other 8 billion of us? The answer is simple. Because Tuvalu is not an anomaly. It is a harbinger. What's happening there is a preview of what will happen elsewhere if our current trajectory doesn't change. The forces drowning Tuvalu are global. Melting glaciers, expanding oceans, warming atmosphere don't respect national borders. The sea that's swallowing Tuvalu's beaches is the same sea that laps at the shores of Florida, Bangladesh, the Netherlands, and every other coastal region in the world. Major coastal cities, Miami, Jakarta, Alexandria, Venice, are already grappling with rising sea levels and increased flooding. The situation in Tuvalu has moved beyond a distant threat and has become a full-blown, present-day emergency. The clock is ticking, and the time for incremental change has long since passed. Scientific projections say much of Tuvalu could become uninhabitable within the next few decades. This is not a problem for the next generation. It's a crisis for this one. We are no longer talking about prevention. We are talking about survival. If nothing changes, the future looks unimaginably bleak. National dissolution will accelerate. Freshwater sources will become completely contaminated. Islands will depend on external aid for drinking water. Agriculture will cease. Flooding will destroy homes, roads, and the airport. This will trigger a mass exodus, not a choice, but a necessity. Tuvaluans will become climate refugees, scattered globally. Their national identity will fracture. Communities will be broken. The loss would be immeasurable. An entire culture, its language, its music, its art, and its social structures would cease to exist as a living entity. The world would lose centuries of traditional ecological knowledge. The 9 islands would become barren, uninhabitable monuments, a saltwater graveyard. Despite the encroaching sea and the shadow of an uncertain future, the story of Tuvalu is not one of despair. It is, against all odds, a story of profound hope, resilience, and courage. The people of Tuvalu have not surrendered to their fate. They are planting mangroves to protect their coastlines. They are elevating their homes, building rainwater collection systems. They are raising their voices on the world stage with a moral clarity that is impossible to ignore. They are fighting not just for themselves, but for the principle that no nation should be left behind. Their spirit remains unbroken, a beacon of defiance in the face of an existential threat. This struggle offers the world a powerful lesson and an inspiring call to action. Tuvalu teaches us that the climate crisis is not a future problem, but a present reality. It forces us to see the human faces behind the statistics. The fate of Tuvalu is not yet sealed. There is still time, however brief, to change course. The science is clear on what needs to be done. A rapid transition to renewable energy, a global commitment to net zero emissions. The people of Tuvalu are holding a mirror up to our collective conscience. Let us choose to save this sinking paradise.